You know, sometimes the most scary things in life aren't the ghosts and the monsters and the spooky stuff that we've been raised to believe. I actually genuinely believe the scariest things are what human beings are absolutely able to do to each other. Now, this is an island known as Little St. James. It's a cute name, but there are other names for this island too. Those names involve the Island of Sin, Orgy Island, or more commonly known as Epstein Island. Now, on this island, there was hundreds, from what I understand, about 1,000 something victims. A lot of those victims apparently seem to be minors. Now, these kind of stories circulated for quite a long time. Now, Epstein is not somebody that, just started getting investigated, I would say a few years ago. This is back in 2008 when he literally had pleaded guilty in a felony solicitation and procuring a person under the age of 18 for some bad activities. So it's not like this is his first time on the rodeo. For a long time, this man has been investigated for some of the most heinous crimes in human history. And of course, it wasn't until much later when he was jailed in a federal correctional holding facility in Manhattan that he ended up, allegedly, I guess, taking his own life. I say allegedly because honestly, I just don't know what to believe anymore. This might be one of the most insane cover ups that I've seen in quite a long time. So let's get kind of started over here. There's a lot of other cases we're going to be drawing into this just as parallels, but I want to kind of focus on Epstein right now. So a few days ago, I made a video where we kind of looked at Epstein and apparently how the FBI has said that he doesn't really have a client list, even though earlier this year, they literally had the top cop in the country, Pam Bondi, going, "I'm looking at it on my desk." Now, of course, I guess it's kind of retconned a little bit, where apparently that just included all of the filings on her desk.
Sure, sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well.
Even though everyone's kind of always talked about this list, and I want to just preface this by saying I'm not somebody that gets hung up on the labels. Even if it's not a client list, it's definitely got to be a list or register or at least something that involves the names of other high-power global elites that have kind of been caught in the dragnet of Jeffrey Epstein. There's people like Bill Gates who's actually gone through a divorce. One of those reasons for that divorce was the fact that he was so close to a guy like Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, if you were anybody who was of significance and you had your photo taken anywhere near the Epstein-like group, you would probably be mocked and investigated and scrutinized, I would say rightfully so, by a lot of people just because of your affiliation. Now, I'm not somebody that thinks that just because you talked to Jeffrey at some point, you're all evil. This guy was so big and so connected that guaranteed if you were in that billionaires list, you probably shook hands or at least knew who he was just because of how he was connected to a lot of mutuals around you. He's that one guy that everyone seemed to have known. And because he was that one guy, he got to get away with so many of these heinous crimes for so long until, of course, the entire gate burst wide open. So we have to understand something. The Epstein information is important. The Epstein disclosure stuff is important for everyone in the world because remember, this is somebody that's connected to some of the most high power global elites everywhere. We're not just talking about American elites, we're talking about Canadian elites, we're talking about Europeans, we're talking about Indians, we're talking about Japanese people, we're talking about everyone. We're talking about some of the biggest people in the world have been interconnected with this guy in some way or another, right? There are billionaires from all over the world that obviously dictate how our lives are run on a daily basis. So anytime we can see some justice done to people that treat human beings like actual cattle, I'm not joking, like actual cattle these people are treated. Remember, to people like Epstein and some of these billionaires, the alleged abuse that had occurred to about 1,000 people, maybe more. These people were treated like, again, just meat, just literal like drones. They weren't treated as individuals that had gone through a summation of entire life. These are people that were literally treated like, again, cattle. They were treated like animals at this point. They were used, abused, and thrown around. And obviously, this is not something that should be tolerated in any civilized fucking society. And I think everyone, no matter who you are, can get together and agree and say that's wrong. So when we see some level of semblance of justice, especially delivered by the most justice-jerking country in the world, the United States of America, we expect there to be something done. There's kind of an innate belief. It might be naivety if you want to touch it upon like that. But people will think that, hey, it's America, it's the FBI. Of course they want to seek things like justice. Unfortunately, justice really wasn't delivered, and this is where the cover-up kind of comes from. So a few days ago, this clip from Trump, where they were being questioned about this, he comes out and says this.
Ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency? The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the staff?
Yeah, sure. If
Hey, Pam, could I just interrupt for 1
Sure.
second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
So, I don't know, this to me looks like a bit of deflection, and especially coming from a president whose campaigning was based around, again, talking about this Epstein stuff. So a lot of people in the media, all right, obviously people who are covering this, looked back at some of the stuff said. So back on June 2nd, 2024, on Fox and Friends, one host, Rachel Campos Duffy, asks, would you declassify the Epstein files? To which Donald Trump goes, yeah, I would. I guess I would. I think that less so because you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if there's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff in that whole world. So, yeah, I guess he's saying, I would, as long as there's not, mischaracterizations in there, which would be a little weird. Like, okay, hold on a minute, you want to declassify his files. I think it's interesting to see what the bad guys are saying about the other elites they're working with. I think everyone wants to see that, right? That's the kind of, we don't want partial lists released where, some names are blacked or redacted. We want to see the whole thing. We want to see his relationship to everyone, even if that means somebody like Donald Trump, right? We want to see these connections. So in a podcast with Lex Friedman, he goes, yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it. Even J.D. Vance, to a podcaster known as Theo Vaughn, goes, seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing. Again, you guys are working in the federal government. You guys have access to information that we do not have access to. And again, I made this evident fact, when I talked about this last time, because again, when these people say something like an Epstein list, as J.D. Vance had said, obviously, these are individuals that know about this stuff more than the average person. They work in the Department of Justice. They have close ties to it. They're able to access privileged information. It's why attorney generals like Pam Bondi, if they say things like Epstein lists, if they say things like client lists, it has more of a weight than a journalist, than you and I, than any other random civilian. Because these people just have access to more information. It's understood that they have access to more information. It's why we fucking believed this farce for the longest time. Because this was the big federal government guys talking about this. Even on Joe Rogan, the FBI director, Kash Patel, was asked, the narrative has always been that there's video. Now, where's the chain of custody? Is there evidence that there's video? Is there evidence that it was moved around, stored, protected from people looking at it? To which Kash Patel goes, you're going to get all that information. Like, that's literally what we're putting together. And we're going to give you every single thing we have and can. And that's the whole point. Now we're figuring out how to put it out. Now, obviously, this is a stark contrast from, there is no client list, okay? Guys, we need you to forget about it. Now, I don't know, the other day, Trump was talking about tariffs and everything to Canada and the European Union again, To which, honestly, I don't care. Either fucking do the tariffs or don't fucking do the tariffs, all right? Don't stop. Quit jerking us around. And especially when it's market close, just be honest. We're talking about these tariffs. We're talking about all these other things because the government wants to completely misdirect from this Epstein nonsense, which is not nonsense. It's one of the biggest promises, and we're slowly being gaslit into believing that apparently it's just not that big of a deal. Why are people still talking about this creep? It's because this creep was connected to some of the most high-profile people in the world. People that dictate how you and I get to live. Now, the infamous jail footage that I wanted to retouch upon again was actually investigated forensically, and there were some discrepancies here. So, for instance, in this footage, around 11:58, there is apparently an entire minute missing. In fact, that looks to be an entire jump cut. Now, the thing about it is, according to a lot of according to Pam Bondi, I believe, it was because that the systems involved around this jail footage had to be like reset. Like it was just some quick like reset or re-recording. Like you had to end the recording, start something brand new or something of that nature, right? It was like a technical reason for what this had occurred. But this is where things get a little bit more laughable. Now, if you want to forensically investigate this footage, well, let's download it directly from the government. So in this FBI memo, and again, I'm going to show you how to do this just literally by yourself. So this is justice.gov/OPA media and whatnot. So as part of our commitment to transparency, the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings relating to Jeffrey Epstein. To ensure that the review was thorough, the FBI conducted digital searches of its database, hard drive, and network drives, as well as physical searches of squad areas, locked cabinets, desks, closets, and other areas where responsive material. So again, this is all just shit that they want to tell you. Let's scroll all the way down to where the FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing the color, and improving its sharpness for greater clarity and viewability. The full raw and enhanced videos are available at the following links. So here they provided video file 1 and video file 2. So you see how in there they say the full raw and enhanced videos, they actually gave you the full raw and the enhanced video. Now, in this implication, the full raw means you just grabbed the MP4s or the video files from the fucking actual security system and threw them online, right? Because that's all I give a shit about. Obviously, I don't give a shit about video file 2, assuming that's the enhanced version, because I don't want to see anything touched upon and edited. So if you play video 1, for instance, you can see right here in the beginning, it's a little bit dull. Video 2, they actually did increase the saturation, contrast, and whatnot, okay? So I don't care about the edited version. The edited version means fuck and all to me. What I want to see is the actual original version. So I downloaded the original version, as you can see right here, video 1. It's a full 19.5 gigabytes. So here's how you do a quick analysis or a quick check forensically. Now, this isn't like entirely like crazy. It's not like I'm using, police forensic tools. But for instance, if we go into, the Linux terminal, and again, this could be Windows, Mac, or anything, download a tool known as EXIF tool. And again, all you have to do is navigate yourself to that download folders. And I'm doing it just to show you what this looks like. So in video 1, hitting enter, you see all this information. So let's kind of read it through, okay? So this is video 1. Now, I have not modified it in any way, shape, or form. You can see that obviously the XMP toolkit, it has Adobe thrown into it. Adobe Media Encoder 2024. You can see exactly when it was made, when it was modified, when the metadata was created. So immediately right here, it wasn't from the actual like security system. Unless the security system is fucking using Adobe, this shit was edited in a video editing software. You can figure it out yourself. Throw something into Adobe, export it, compare the EXIF information. It will have these similarities. So again, let's go down a little bit and see just what's kind of happening. So in the ingredients right over here, the ingredients document ID, it was important to kind of spot it here because according to the ingredients, it may have appeared that two separate files were kind of slapped together. So again, kind of a shady situation. Really doesn't look like the full raw the government gave us. In fact, you can even go and see the project path. So somebody, MJ Cole, was used. This is the account name on the computer this was exported on. And MCC4 was the project name for that file. So what have we learned here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the government couldn't even cover up the fucking metadata for the raw video they provided. Now, again, I don't know what the government might have cut or removed from this entire situation. I don't know what they may have modified. They may not even have digitally modified anything. But what I do know is this is, in fact, a bit of a lie, okay? And any way you spin this around, look, I've worked with video long enough to know what you can and cannot do in a video editor. And the fact that they release this as raw footage, but it is verifiably thrown into a video editing software and exported through Media Encoder is you know, if there was a red flag in the fucking room, it would be redder than me right now. That's how insane this is. And again, there's a lot of people that love to defend the shit out of their governments. A lot of people treat politicians like they're fucking gods or something. And the reality of this is this, okay? These people are rich, powerful. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican or a third party, or it doesn't matter where you are. Once you're in that elite circle, once you're as big as the Clintons or the Trumps or whatever, you are in a different echelon, okay? You are in a different plane of existence. You are treated far differently than the rest of the human beings out there. And I'll touch upon this a little bit by the time we get to the end. But this case, the protection of the elites makes sense because the elites don't want their entire power to crumble. They don't want to lose what they have. And again, these people have the ability to obfuscate and get rid of anything they want. Remember, there are different rules when it comes to law. You and I interface with the law and the enforcement of the law in a far different manner than people like Trump or people like Clinton or anybody. Okay, it doesn't matter what your ideologies or your political beliefs are. You live in a world where you're either an elite or you're not an elite. Okay, so the people at the bottom better stick together instead of being constantly divided, because these people benefit every single day as long as there is division at the bottom. But anyways, rant aside, let's get back to the whole Epstein cover-up. So obviously in this entire situation, the deputy director and even the deputy director being Dan Bongino and the director being Kash Patel, have apparently wanted to leave the entire federal government simply because of how mishandled this was. You know, this was the party that constantly wanted to, quote unquote, drain the swamp, right? And I'm somebody that's totally cool with draining the swamp. I think it's great to see, you know, the deep state, or seeing like a lot of people who, you know, think that they're above the law, not actually be above the law. But it seems like that isn't how it's handled. And look, I'm not an American, but I sure as shit pay enough money to the Internal Revenue Service where I think I have a reasonable ask to say, how is the FBI even spending my money? Are they actually, you know, chasing for justice? No, apparently as of like what, literally yesterday, they're so focused on going after ROM sites at this point that, you know, again, everything is being done right now to divert attention away from this cover-up disaster. And nobody should be diverting their attention away. I think this should be a huge sticking point, especially if you're an American, because remember, this guy was a real evil fuck. And who knows how deep his hooks went into. Who was compromised? I think you as a citizen have a right to know how compromised your government is. Because really it seems like the people that wanted to drain the deep state actually really are just the fucking deep state, okay? And really, how couldn't they be? Especially considering some of these people were already at the top of their game. They are the global elites. You can't be friends with the global elites. Like I said, they live in a different world than you and I. And even people that aren't related into the government, but people that are very connected because they found a way in, right? Like Elon Musk through, you know, platforms like Doge, for instance. You know, when Elon Musk goes out and tweets the words, "Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. This is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT." Again, either this guy has seen something, which I wouldn't doubt. It's Elon Musk. This guy has been in bed with the government for quite a few months, okay? Now things have probably soured, but what if he has seen something? You know, it leads me to believe that obviously for these elites, this is just a fucking joke, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Human suffering doesn't matter to these people. It's just a little bit of a leverage point to use against somebody when it's convenient. Because here's the thing, either this guy's name was in the files and he's just holding on to it, or they weren't in the files and this whole thing is treated like a joke, when in reality, it shouldn't be treated as a joke. This should be cause for a fucking revolution, okay? But I'm not going to go that far into my video because, again, I'm just a fat Indian guy on the internet that knows a little bit too much about computers, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. Now, the thing about any of this is, obviously, I wanted to compare this to other cases as well, too. Now, just as a quick idea, you probably also heard of, like, Sean Combs, or Diddy by his name, by his stage name. Now, Diddy was an individual that was indicted for racketeering, conspiracy, and then, of course, sex trafficking by force, fraud, coercion, and, of course, multiple counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. And of course, he had a recent trial where obviously he pretty much dodged all of the big points. And I believe like 2 counts of transporting to engage in prostitution stuck. And of course, each of these comes with around 10 years of prison time. Now, obviously, with good lawyers, which I'm not going to be surprised that he has access to, that number may reasonably get reduced to, I think, at best, 2 to 4 years, and at worst, maybe like 6 to 7 years. Now, to give you an idea, this guy was being investigated also for a reasonably long time, too. You had November 2023 when he had a lawsuit by an ex-girlfriend for incredibly serious situations. I mean, there were, hotel footages that weren't being accepted, even though it reasonably showed that, Diddy wasn't exactly a good guy. He may have been a violent person, allegedly, of course, right? Now, of course, down the road, when a lot of this information started coming out and over 100 accusers had actually emerged accusing Diddy of some of the worst stuff, you had Homeland Security raiding his house in Los Angeles, Miami, New York. And inside these areas, they had seized all of his devices. They found illicit drugs. They found illegal weapons. And of course, obviously, we can all laugh, but the 1,000 bottles of like baby oil, which were used in these freak-offs, these crazy sex parties that he would have. But the thing about it is, obviously, it's funny to laugh at some of the absurd stuff when it comes to the Diddy case. I know that I have. But to bring you back into it, this is also another human being that allegedly treated other humans, obviously, I guess, lesser in status and wealth than him, as fucking cattle. To which, apparently, he had basically been accused of leading this massive criminal enterprise where there was sex trafficking, there was forced labor, there was kidnapping, there was the most insane shit that you could ever see. The point is, we're looking at decades of abuse that was being done, obviously behind the scenes. And obviously it was all centered around one of the biggest names in the entertainment industry. And to speak up solo against a guy like this is dangerous. It's one of the reasons why, I had a lot of care for the victims in the Epstein case too, because, when you come out by yourself against somebody as powerful as Diddy or Epstein, it's dangerous. Your life actually is in a dangerous balance, all right? You could die. Something can happen to you. Because when you're going up against some of the most powerful people with not just money to lose, but losing that power, that's when you enter into the most dangerous parts of the world. And of course, for somebody like Diddy, for somebody like Epstein, it wouldn't have been an issue to make somebody disappear. So obviously, when you had hundreds of people coming out, it's great. It's awesome because then there's strength in numbers. But then all of that means nothing when the actual major charges, the criminal charges, end up getting completely fucking dropped, end up getting completely swept under the rug. And then it puts those people, now hundreds of those victims, potentially in danger because now they can be targeted possibly legally, possibly extra legally, who knows? But this is a pretty scary situation for anybody that has ever been victimized by these people. And it's treated as a joke by some of the politicians that we put into power by throwing our vote towards them, because we end up believing their lies and their care for justice. Now, one of the things that I kind of compare Epstein to is this case that I looked at years ago. Now, you may remember a video I made called Trafficking Hub, where I looked into the claims made that massive adult websites, like Pornhub, for instance, were absolutely, apparently, allegedly complicit in the trafficking of human beings. Now, in one of those instances, I looked deeper into a site that you may have heard of, a site known as Girls Do P, right? We'll just put it like that, just for the sake of YouTube's auto filters. Now, this is a studio that was kind of listed on the hub as one of those premier partners. And at the time, everything seemed kind of okay, right? Like it seemed whatever. But obviously, when you look deeper into the situation, that studio was nowhere near as crystal clean as you could expect. So the site, which was founded by Michael Pratt and then Matthew Wolf around 2006, 2007, that was a website where they would basically go on to like Craigslist, for instance. They would put out an ad where, people would come over, individuals, women usually, they would be in like, their late teen years, and they would come in and they would effectively be pressured to record, again, adult content, especially under false pretenses. And of course, many of these girls who were being filmed and uploaded onto sites like The Hub for millions of people to watch were told that, hey, this content was never going to make it on the internet. In fact, in some cases, it was recorded for private auteurs when it wasn't. They were fucking lied to. So these women ended up having their stuff publicly released under false pretenses. Obviously, friends and family can probably find them, especially if they're featured on massive adult video sharing platforms. And of course, these individuals ended up filing state lawsuits against these people for trafficking them, for fraud, for coercion. And of course, obviously, it makes sense, right? The testimony basically involved from the survivors showed that, yes, these people were incredibly predatory. The judges even awarded 22 victims around $12 million. Now, obviously, in 2019, when the federal agencies were putting all of the indictments onto the, ringleaders of this, studio, this scummy studio, Pratt, who was one of the founders, liquidated all of his assets and just fled the country. And of course, the FBI put out a $100,000 award and made him one of the top 10 most wanted people. So again, I don't want to go off topic here, but obviously, it's one of the reasons why I am anti-goon, not because I'm like a no-fap guy. It's just because, like, ever since you see how the sausage is made, when you see that some of the biggest studios in the name, some of the most premier studios, studios you kind of laugh at the names of, when you really see what's happening behind the scenes, it paints it casts an incredibly negative light to anybody in this industry. It is a dangerous industry the further you go towards the top, right? And the reason I'm talking about this is that there are a lot of parallels into how these people treated victims, and you would see how Epstein treated their victims. And there are key differences, but we'll get to that real quick. Let me just finish this entire situation. Now, obviously, Pratt, who fled the country, ended up eventually getting arrested in Spain, and then he was extradited all the way back. And since he was extradited all the way back, it seems that Pratt will now face a life sentence, which ultimately is the best thing ever. But even then, the victimization still continues, because through deepfakes and through these videos still constantly circulating the internet, yeah, these women who are part of this stuff will never ever truly be free from their victimization, because this kind of stuff will always float around on the internet, as sad as that sounds. And under US federal law, this whole case falls not under fraud, but it falls under human trafficking, which again parallels back to Jeffrey Epstein. But there are key differences, obviously, and those key differences are always that Jeffrey Epstein, for instance, really got away with it for the longest time because, A, there was just a lot of elites that he worked with, elites that will do anything to protect and cover themselves up. Obviously, with GDP, wow, what an acronym. Because GDP's like ringleaders were not connected to, state leaders, senators, presidents, they pretty much got stamped down. But somebody like Jeffrey Epstein effectively got to get away with it. And even though that he is dead, a lot of the big people that were connected to him got away because everything is just swept under the rug. It really shows you how corrupt justice is. And if anything, looking just into the statements made by this administration and just how this case was handled, there's no way that you can sit down and say that this wasn't actually a cover-up. It has all the hallmarks of a cover-up. In fact, if anything, I am so jaded in this situation that I actually genuinely don't even think somebody like Epstein is even gone. I think, if anything, this is a government that can disappear a person and give them a new identity everywhere. This guy probably is living somewhere else. I don't know. It's just how jaded I've been the last few days looking at how this has played out, looking at how Diddy has played out. And unless you're truly somebody not connected to those at the top, you will face justice by the FBI. But the moment you have some semblance of connection to those in power, the FBI will conveniently not have access to all of these lists, or, be unable to, I guess, cover up video forensics, right? That everyone is able to uncover in the matter of hours. Ladies and gentlemen, Epstein is truly people will not forget this for a long time, and they shouldn't. Because if anything, it is the first time that I think you can truly guide somebody from beginning to end and show them this is a cover up, this is something completely wrong, and it doesn't matter who you vote for, it doesn't matter who you put into power. Every single one of these scumbags is against you. Simple as that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you kind of blackpilled a little bit. And if anything, this black pill isn't to invoke more negativity. It's just to wake people up and tell them, it's just to remind people, like, you know, if you're going to put people into power, you have to hold them to an incredibly high standard, right? You have to constantly remind them of their dues to the people and their dues to justice. Because the more people let individuals like Trump get away with deflection, the less justice is actually going to happen. And it shouldn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. You should care about justice and the betterment of man over, you know, whatever cult of personality you vote for. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out.